Look at all the cultures out there, particularly in the East, where they're purchasing gold as jewelry, high carat jewelry, and you see gold coins being passed on when they have different celebrations, weddings, and everything else, where you'll see large amounts of wealth being passed from family to family or being passed down generation to generation. And this is something that will go on for the foreseeable future. And that means that there's always going to be value in it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into CrushTheStreet.com. I'm joined today with a special guest. We're going to get an update on Bitcoin, gold, the economy, and kind of what's going on with the global economic mess that we're dealing with. I have on the line David Quinteri. He's with the Money GPS. It's his YouTube channel, and he just released a brand new book, Global Economic Collapse, and I'm sure we'll get some nuggets of wisdom from that book in this call today. David, thanks for coming on the line with me.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you on, and I enjoy speaking to people who are well-versed on what is going on in the real world, and I consider you very high on that list. So first of all, let's talk about Bitcoin. We were just going over it here in the pre-interview, and it looks like it's just hit a brand new all-time high. I'll start you off with this. It's getting awfully close to gold's price. Any significance in this? And let's just get your initial thoughts on Bitcoin.
I'll just make a few points. First of all, as you said, I'm seeing a convergence in the price, and I actually think that it will go higher than what gold is at right now. And, you know, in a longer term scenario, I'm not sure, but at least for the short term, it looks like it's going to rise far beyond that. What I would say is that we have to look historically at the Bitcoin price. You saw back in 2013, the price went parabolic in such a short period of time. It was unstable, it was younger, it wasn't as mature as it is now. Then, after it dropped off, we've seen a slow and consistent, steady rise in the price of Bitcoin. It has been much more stable now, and any of the drop-offs, except for the more recent one that we saw a fairly significant fall there, I would say that pretty much it has been slowly and steadily rising. I think that's great. And my thoughts on Bitcoin in general, I think that it's often looked as being a means of making money. And I think that this isn't the best thing about Bitcoin. I think that it has two very good features. Number one is that for individuals who have restrictive capital controls in their country, namely China, they can pull money out, and they're doing so. That's the way that they're able to, you know, sort of use a loophole, use this technology to get money out. And I also do believe that its ability to transact between individuals where they can use, have extremely low rates as opposed to, going through traditional means. I think that ability to deal with one person or another, or even a business, at the transaction cost being very low, and I think that's really one of the more important highlights about Bitcoin.
Sure. Well, let's get your thoughts then about the upcoming Bitcoin ETF. First of all, do you think it's going to happen? And is this pretty significant in terms of Bitcoin's relevance in today's world?
I think there is much more attention now than there ever has been. The ETF signals to me that it's more stable, that companies are looking into it. I mean, you're seeing central banks even interested in the blockchain and everything else. So you're seeing it become, as I said before, more mature. I think this is important. In terms of whether the ETF will happen or not, I'm not sure. It doesn't look like it's, something that they will be able to want to regulate. I think they want to keep it, in terms of the governments, they want to sort of keep it out of the hands of people. They want to not give it credibility, and I think that's obviously a problem. In terms of the ETF itself, I think it'll bring a lot of money in. I think as soon as this would come on stage, let's say, it would it would see a lot of money flowing into it. You would see individuals investing in it. I don't think it's necessarily, though, for the individual investor, a good thing to put your money into. I think you want to get into Bitcoins themselves, not the ETFs. And the same with precious metals. Now, people do this because, for example, in Canada, you have your TFSA, which allows you, a tax-free savings account, for example. So you're allowed to invest in a certain amount per year, where you have tax sheltering on a small amount of money per year. So you can do that. So people oftentimes will put a little bit of money into a gold ETF, let's say. And surely that's better than a lot of what's available out there, but it's still not the same. You want that as real as it gets. So you want to hold physical precious metals. You also want to hold the Bitcoins themselves. So in terms of, would I recommend the ETF? No, but I think it's good for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it says a lot about the direction it's going. So I'm glad, actually, you're one of the sound money people that actually believe in Bitcoin, and I'm just curious, how strong are your convictions? How vital, and do you think Bitcoin's going to be around for 50 to 100 years, or is it a fad? I mean, what are your overall long-term thoughts on Bitcoin?
I'm still in the stage of being a little skeptical about it, but not in the technology, not in the fact that, Bitcoin could be around 50 years from now. It could be the new method of transacting between people. And I think that, and I'm saying not necessarily Bitcoin, but cryptocurrencies in general, it's adding to it another layer of protection for the person. And that's where I think it really shines. In terms of, whether Bitcoin, that particular cryptocurrency, is going to be around, I don't know. I'm not able to necessarily predict that, but I do see more of a growing acceptance toward it. So I think that people should have some exposure to it, whether it's, just some play money or something that you want to have. I believe in having all assets. I don't think you should put all your money into Bitcoin. In fact, there's many people who I talk to all the time which dump large sums of money into Bitcoin, and they may have sold off other assets as a result. I don't think that's very smart, because whenever you put your eggs into one basket, you may regret it later. And ultimately, the price of Bitcoin might be, let's say, 10 times higher in 10 years from now, or I'm just making up numbers. But what if you needed that money 2 years from now, except the price at this point had come down significantly later on to go up? You would be, out of luck, let's just say. So this is the problem. I think we need much more diversification, although technologically, I believe that Bitcoin is a good thing.
Yes, I've talked to people about that very same thing, and I believe the same thing. Bitcoin is very difficult to store your wealth for short periods of time, even though I believe that it's going higher from even where it is now, at talking with it at basically at its all-time high. It's still not a store of wealth in the terms that it's too volatile in the short term. Although you might buy it today and it might be $1,500 in the near future. Who knows, right? But I completely agree with what you're saying there, David. I want to get your sentiment on gold. And this is interesting because it would seem like now that many are getting optimistic on the economy and are not as drawn to gold the way they were, let's say, prior to the election. I know there's a lot of controversy over Trump, pro-Trump, against Trump, but for whatever reason, the market seems to be very optimistic about, this businessman here in office, and it seemed to somewhat put kind of take the fear trade equation off the table. I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
I do agree, and that isn't bullish for the gold ETFs. You saw, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, George Soros said that he was selling off, or it was filings anyway, that selling off on the gold ETFs. But to an individual, these gold ETFs should be insignificant. In fact, the price that you see is not even gold. It's not even a gold metal. What you're looking at is gold futures, which, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't exist. It's all paper. So you as an individual, you buy gold. You shouldn't be looking at it to say, I am going to be able to make 10 times my money in the next 10 years because so-and-so said that the debt is expanding, it's going to be hyperinflation, the dollars will inflate greatly, and therefore this asset I'm holding, gold, is always great for inflationary times, therefore it's going to be worth more. I think that's a dangerous policy. I think you invest in gold to carry wealth with you, and that wealth can be passed on from generation to generation. Look at all of the cultures out there, whether, particularly in the East, where they're purchasing gold as jewelry, high carat jewelry, and you see gold coins being passed on when they have different celebrations, weddings, and everything else, where you'll see large amounts of wealth being passed from family to family or being passed down generation to generation. And this is something that will go on for the foreseeable future. And that means that there's always going to be value in it. Whether the price that you see on these charts, to me that's a little bit insignificant, but I would say that we need to look at what's happening in the markets right now and understand that the ultimate collapse will come regardless of who's in charge. We need to look at all of the actual factors, the fact that you're not going to be able to dig yourself out of this mess, and that is the government itself. It's gone so bad that unfortunately there can't be a time in which this can be fixed. The debt can't be paid off. It's impossible because of the way that this system operates. It needs to go into more debt to pay off the old debt. Therefore, it's a mathematical impossibility. And in fact, we've already reached, particularly in the US, already reached levels that it's literally a mathematical impossibility. It's been calculated over and over again by all sorts of economists. Now, whether that happens tomorrow or happens 10 years from now, it remains to be seen.
David, the name of your book is the Global Economic Collapse, and I just wanted to see if you would share a little bit of some of the main points and the message that you're trying to get across to people. I know the title is pretty self-explanatory, but if you'd like to take it a little further, please do.
Absolutely. So this is my second book. And in my first book, I basically got into a lot of the foundational principles, diagrams, charts, and analysis of the financial system. However, in this book, I do touch on a few of those points, but I really get into what is most important about this book is it leads up to it. There's 4 chapters there's 4 sections. In that 4th section, there is what I call the money GPS strategy. So we're all chasing after trying to get more earnings because these earnings essentially provide us with a means of paying our bills. So we try to make more money, we try to accumulate all these assets and everything, and that's great. But what happens when for example, your property taxes rise dramatically, or there's a hyperinflation, or there's a food shortage, or there's anything else? All of a sudden that throws destroys your plans. So my strategy, the money GPS strategy, is to have a way to eject ourselves from the monetary system itself, or at least lessen our dependence on it. And just as an example, I'll give you something out of the book. Having solar panels to reduce your expenses on electricity. There are ways to get tax rebates, tax incentives to get that money back from the government. There's also, for example, if you have agricultural land in some areas, depends on where you are, you need to look this up for yourself, but in some areas, you'll get if you have that agricultural land that's zoned as agricultural, you're able to get your property taxes back I mean, these are things that people don't think about, and people need to realize, look, if your expenses are next to nothing, you don't need to worry about all the other things. And this is what I talk about in the book. I think it's a huge, huge change. It's a paradigm shift that people generally don't get into. But if you combine the knowledge that you have already in with the Money GPS strategy, you're going to be doing great.
I want to ask you a couple more questions, but please let everyone know where they can actually get that book.
Absolutely. So the book is available at Amazon. Whether that's in the US or Canada, you can just go to your particular Amazon and you'll find it there.
Awesome. David, let's turn the conversation over to Europe for a moment here. Oil has come down quite a bit, and many believe that in 2014 that the US orchestrated a takedown that would put pressure on Russia, specifically because they're so heavily involved with the oil and it's part of their GDP. And you've reported recently that the oil slump is now hurting Norway. Please get us up to speed on this news.
Every commodity-based nation is going to suffer whenever you have a slump in the prices. Norway happens to be one of those countries. Ultimately, I think that they are really just part of the ripple effect of everything that's happened. You're looking at a nation which is doing a lot better, Norway specifically, is doing a lot better than the rest of Europe when you look at it statistically. I mean, their unemployment rate since the financial crisis actually doubled. However, they're still at 4.5%. So they're doing a lot better than what I would say in Europe. And again, it seems to be a ripple effect for them. In terms of what you mentioned before, I reported on it when this news was released. And the way I look at it is, if you want to hurt a country, you got to hurt that major export. I mean, a lot of these places rely specifically on oil revenue, Saudi Arabia being one of them. And a lot of people would say, why would you want Saudi Arabia to be hurt in that? Because obviously you have a nation like Russia who's going to be hurt, but at the same time Saudi is going to be hurt, and they're big partners with the US. Well, I would say that obviously, though we can't prove it necessarily, you're seeing warfare that is taking place. There's trade wars, there's currency wars, there's everything taking place. The US and Saudi Arabia are partners in I would say in behind the scenes, but also obviously in front of our faces. We know that they have deals going on. The petrodollar is something that simply is not going to just go down without anybody having a word about it. You're seeing right now is purposely subduing the price of oil. And the reason I say this, the reason I know this is a fact, is that when you saw prices at $110 a barrel, and then within a very short period of time, historically, the price came down to about $30 a barrel, and they suggested that there was a glut of oil. A glut of oil does not bring the price down that dramatically in that short period of time. It is not possible. They are working specifically to bring this price down. Now, maybe it shouldn't have been at 110 in the first place, but all I know is that there's a manipulation going on, and there are countries being hurt by this. Canada's one of them, and Norway is another, and obviously many others out there.
So the European Union in general, a lot of economic problems. What are your overall projections, and what do you see happening? Do you see just a big disruption in the rising up of the populace, and how do you see this playing out? What are your overall thoughts?
I see Europe disintegrating into chaos. I see what's happening right now to be just a fraction of what we are going to see. Look at a city like London, where there have been a few times where the city's been burning. And that's over something small. Look at Athens, which there's almost no way that at this point it can ever ever recover. Look at what is happening, and it's all being done intentionally. When you have something like the IMF, a supranational entity, which comes in and decides the fate of these countries, it happened, very similarly in Portugal. You look at Ireland, you look at Spain, Italy. I mean, go through it, the list, and you see assets being sold off to the highest bidder, or in many cases the lowest bidder. But you have islands being sold off, airports, businesses, land. Everything is all being sold at these fire sale prices, and that is exactly what's going on in Greece right now. You're seeing that anyway all throughout Europe. When you look at the overall plan, it's definitely to cause a collapse on purpose. Make sure that people rise up against the government, keep them unsteady and unstable, and they will be looking for a solution, the Hegelian dialectic. And this right here, fine, you want to sell off that business, that's fine. The people will just say, it's fine. As long as I get my pension, as long as I can, do what I have to do, as long as I'll survive, if I can eat, then that's okay. But the long-term strategy is to take every single thing of value away from these countries.
So, David, do you think something like Brexit and, possibly some of these other countries breaking away from the European Union, is that controlled, or is that something the elites are not expecting?
I am in my personal belief is that, and once again, this is my own opinion, that nothing is done without the approval, or at least it's given sort of the indirect direction of the elite, the globalists, whatever you want to call them. I don't think that they would be in control for hundreds, perhaps, let's say, thousands of years, and then something slips through the cracks. The only reason why there would be, let's say, a disintegration of the EU is if they're going to roll it into something even worse.
Sure.
That's what concerns me very much, because first of all, we haven't had a Brexit yet. I really hope that there is one. And I hope that others follow suit. The EU is a tyranny. I mean, having technocratic elite above deciding your laws, I mean, this is a destruction. This is a disaster. But I don't even know how far it's going to be able to go. Hoping, though, that it does. I see this hopefully snowballing, although I just see that they have complete control in every single way. I mean, they're managing the currencies, they're managing all these nations, they have the entities like the IMF, the UN, NATO, they're all in full control. Why would they ever let go of that?
You make a good point, but it would almost seem, too, like a guy like Donald Trump was not in the cards for the elite. He seemed, especially, I watch a lot of news, I watch a lot of the speeches. I mean, the mainstream media seems absolutely shocked by a guy like Donald Trump winning the U.S. election, and it would seem like he slipped through the cracks in their plan. And I don't know. I mean, do you believe Donald Trump was planted by the elites?
I think that maybe it could be one of these scenarios where that he wasn't necessarily chosen to be there. However, they're letting this happen so that all of the decisions that he makes, or that the Congress make under this, under his rule, that they'll be able to use it against them. And I think that's just what will happen. They're always taking advantage of the situations. And when you look at, for example, Greece, they had a referendum where they said, we need to take a bailout. And I believe it was 2015 when this happens. This is the third bailout. They said, we need to take a bailout, but I'm going to let the people decide. I want the people to vote. And the people voted, and they said no to the bailout. And what happened almost immediately, it was maybe the next day, where they said, we are going to accept the bailout. Those in control don't care. They don't care what people think, and ultimately they're going to slaughter as many people as they can. They want people to be poor. That's the whole point of the system. Whether you have a Donald Trump in the presidency or not, the globalists are still running things. The president doesn't really run things. I'm sure he has some control, but there are people out there, the puppet masters, who are really in control. I mean, the president of the United States might be a powerful individual, but not compared to something like the IMF or the UN or NATO or anything. They don't even... You saw Leon Panetta tell the Jeff Sessions, actually, when he was senator there, he said, we are going to go to war, we're going to use NATO to do it, and we might, maybe we'll tell you. I mean, that's when you know that this is a criminal entity rising far above the government structure.
Well, powerful words there, David Quinteri of the Money GPS. David, if you have any closing thoughts here that you'd like to share, maybe some words of advice for the audience, please share this with us before we say goodbye.
Absolutely. Just very quickly, I wanted to note that people need to keep their eyes on this system. Get reading, look at your history books first of all, and then once you know the history, you got it down packed, then you can see how it's all unfolding just like it was before. And you'll note right now that what we have is a slow and steady collapse. It's not going to happen overnight. That's what people don't understand. They're saying, when's this collapse coming? I'm getting bored. You know, it's been all this time and this and that. Well, what you're not noticing is what many people that I talk to every single day is that poverty is truly at this time increasing. Look at the 10 cities which are developing. Look at the chaos that has erupted in Europe. You look at one particular area. Look, if you want to look at the housing prices in Vancouver, sure, you'll say there's a boom. You want to look at the S&P 500? Yes, there's a boom. But when you look at actual people's lives, things are taking a turn for the worse. So be prepared. That's my message. And if you're trying to make, accumulate wealth, that's great, but you need to be prepared. And there's a lot of things that means a lot of different things, but you need to be ultimately ready for what's coming. You need to have your assets spread across a wide range of different things, perhaps even geographically, if it's precious metals. You want to have the ability to, there's so many things. Be prepared. That's my message.
All right, my friend. Well, thank you for coming on the show with me. Everyone, The Global Economic Collapse, get it on Amazon. We'll have the link in the description area. Thanks, David.
Thank you very much.